Hi friends, Sarah here. We talk about our climate crisis on this channel and how you can take responsible and impactful actions today. Why do we call it our climate crisis? Well, buckle in folks, let's slosh through the semantics tube of linguistic fun and ask, how should we be talking about this whole planetary destruction thing? Words matter. You know that from your high school literature class. So let's talk about some definitions, some word swaps we should make, and why we should actually make them. Starting with knowing the difference between weather and climate. Weather is the short-term daily fluctuations of air temperature, wind, rain, etc. Like today in Vancouver, it's 73 degrees and partly cloudy. Climate, on the other hand, is temperature and other atmospheric conditions throughout the year, averaged over a series of years. Vancouver is a moderate oceanic climate prone to warmer summers and cold winters. It's called climate change because we're talking about historic averages, not daily temperature. So when we hear that July 2019 was the hottest year ever recorded, and that the global average temperature last month was 62.1 degrees, and the 5 hottest Julys ever recorded have occurred in the past 5 years, this is climate. But when we hear 62.1 degrees, that doesn't seem very hot to most of us. But when you consider France, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, and Luxembourg experience the hottest days in their nation's history, that is weather. 2. Know the difference between climate change and global warming. The phrase climate change is the widely accepted term that encompasses the long-term change in the average condition of the atmosphere. But the climate deniers do have a point. The climate has always been changing, but not like this. When we use the word climate change, it's shorthand for human-induced climate change, or basically the effects that us humans have made on our atmospheric averages. Whereas global warming means a long-term increase in the Earth's average air temperature. So when we were talking about those 5 hottest Julys on record, that can be attributed to global warming. But when we're talking about wildfires or droughts or hurricanes or all the other effects of global warming, that's holistically summed up in climate change. One way to think of it is that global warming is the cause and climate change is the effect. And it's really easy to use these words interchangeably, but sometimes it's not super accurate. So if you're ever at a loss for words or still confused, just stick to climate change. 3. Swap climate change for our climate crisis. So since you've got those differences down, let's throw another wrench into it. Because it's so difficult and frustrating to explain the difference between climate change and human-induced climate change, I prefer just using the term our climate crisis, and there are a couple reasons why I think this. First, our replaces human-induced in an easier and simpler to understand way. Our gives us ownership of the problem because you and I are to blame for our climate crisis, though not everyone equally, but it gives us this sense of ownership and that we have to work together to solve this problem. Second, replacing change with crisis. Change is neutral. Is it the good change that you get from moving to a new and exciting place? Is it the bad change that happens after you get dumped? We don't know. How is our climate changing? We don't know. Well, obviously, we do know, and it's a bit worse than, the kind of getting dumped kind of feeling, that kind of change. But those climate deniers can take this term and twist it, finagle it, blah, 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 blah. Crisis is accurate, it's immediate, and it's action-packed. And I'm not the only one that's using this term. The Guardian actually updated their style guide to include this reasoning for using climate crisis in their language. The phrase climate change, for example, sounds rather passive and gentle when what scientists are talking about is a catastrophe for humanity. There's also research that backs up that climate crisis evokes a more emotional reaction across the political spectrum. But we have to be careful with this because if it's too much of an emotional reaction, people will get cognitive dissonance and feel that they're just so overwhelmed with the problem that they may believe in climate change, but their actions will not show any different change because they're overwhelmed. One explanation researchers gave for the elevated reaction that climate crisis evokes is that we've heard the terms global warming and climate change so many times that it's just lost its power. And as I said, they're also just not very good terms to use. They don't evoke any certain reaction and they're just not as accurate as they could be. Other accurate variations to use, but not as good as our climate crisis, include our climate emergency, which is nice, but it just doesn't have that, alliteration. Or we could talk about climate chaos, but I think that one's a bit too strong for right now. Maybe we'll check back in 11 years and then we'll probably have to use that one. And climate breakdown, but I just don't like that one because breakdown reminds me of cars, and we know my hatred for cars. 4, tentatively follow the advice of Frank Luntz. Okay, Frank is a wild card. He's this master Republican messaging strategist who worked on campaigns like changing the word estate tax to death tax to evoke more reaction and caused a big political hullabaloo, but he also worked on the Bush 2003 campaign and really pushed for using the term climate change over global warming because he found that it was less scary. He also said, "A compelling story, even if factually inaccurate, can be more emotionally compelling than a dry recitation of the truth." So it's such a hate-love relationship that I've got with Frank, but I was shocked when my favorite climate change-oriented outlet, Grist, posted an article with the title, "Frank Luntz, the GOP's message master, calls for climate action." Turns out that Frank is now on board with climate action and actually testified in front of the Senate about it in June.
Americans believe climate change is real, and that number goes up every single month. They believe that it is man-made, and that number increases every month, and that both political and business leaders need to do more right now to address it.
Let's talk through about some of the terms that he advises. 1, use cleaner, safer, healthier. Lose sustainable, sustainability. This one hits home because I talk a lot on this channel about sustainability, and that was kind of my intro for a long time. But after I read this, I kind of stepped back and I thought, what does sustainability really mean? And it also helps that one of my friends, Courtney, kind of questioned me on it, and I didn't have a really great definition. Frank says that sustainability rings of the status quo. What are we trying to sustain? The power of fossil fuel companies? The extractionist consumer society that we're living in? Society, man. 2, use working together, lose one world. This one is more targeting those who hold conservative values, but I still think that it's accurate and something that we should be using going forward. And it's really saying that homogeneity is out and collective action is in. To be clear, I still don't really like Frank, but he is really great at what he does, and marketing and messaging can get a really bad rap, and obviously for good reason. But when we're trying to update these terms that we're using, and what I'm trying to get across by this video is that it's not manipulation to say something that's more accurate. The terms that we've been using to describe our climate crisis have not been working. People don't understand really what's going on, and until we use our updated language, and language should evolve, we're not going to really understand, and we're not going to get people to understand the severity of our situation. And there's a difference between evoking an emotional reaction just for fun, or evoking one that's more accurate and causes people to want to rise up and do collective action. That's all for today's video. Let me know in the comments what words you use to describe all of this, and let me know what kind of struggles you've had in communicating with others about our climate crisis. If you feel like it, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications to get a little ping every time I post something. And if you want even more of me, go ahead and go to my website and subscribe to my newsletter, where I'll give you an email every month with more action steps to take. And speaking of action steps, today I just really want you to have a conversation about climate change and let me know and report back how it goes. So thank you friends for watching, and I will see you in the next one.